So I would do this. I would encourage every dad who has any issues with yelling to do this, because this was super helpful. And is I would say to my kid, I would say, hey, earlier today I yelled at you. And they say, I know, Dad, you got really mad. I know, I own it. Okay. Do you think my anger was about you or about me? And initially they would always say about them. And I would say, honey, my anger's never about you. My anger is always telling you about me. I was afraid I was losing control of the situation. Yeah. I was afraid my voice no longer had any power in your life. So I was going to get really loud and make sure it did. And I'm really sorry about that. Will you forgive me for that?
Kyle, welcome to Dad Awesome.
Thank you, Jeff. I'm excited to get to talk about parenting. I love chatting about it.
Yeah, well, when Joey and Heath from RO, and they were like, you've got to meet Kyle. I respect those guys, love those guys, their mission. And then they sent me your podcast. So you were in my ears right away. And right away, I was looking forward to this chat, have been looking forward to it since our pre-call a couple of weeks ago. Can you help introduce your family, though? Start with your wife and kids, kind of age range, and something that made you smile recently in the dad life.
Well, man, my wife and I have been married going on 22 years this year. So close to 22. We have 3 kids, Abby, who's 14, Brennan, who's 11, and Ellie's, who is 7. Yeah, and Ellie was the one who completed our family. I mean, I was done after Abby and Brennan. I'm like, we did it. Boy and girl back to back. So we did it. And then I remember my wife one day, we're swinging the kids in the backyard, and she said, Kyle, I think I've always felt like we're supposed to have 3. And so I was like, are you serious? We're finally sleeping. And so Ellie came along, and she has definitely, like, her name means shining light. And so she's definitely been a shining light. So I would say something that really, man, put a smile on my face recently was, we went to Colorado. We spent some time on a vacation. Yeah. And when we do a vacation like that, I'm always curious with the kids what they enjoy the most about these trips, because we like to go to Colorado a lot. We really love the mountains. And so my older 2 kids, I think, said something I expected, that they said, hey, we love the mountains. We love coming over and seeing the mountains appear in the horizon. The other one said, I love seeing our friends that we get to hang out with. But when it came to my youngest, when it came to Ellie, she kind of surprised me, because she said, I just love the car ride. And I said, you love the car ride? Like, it's like 12 hours in the car. And like, what the car ride? And she said, it's like the only time that we're all together, all 5 of us, for just an extended period of time with no distractions. We're just all together. And I thought that was really interesting that she said that's what she looks forward to the most. So that put a big smile on my face, because I really felt like my wife and I have been intentional about that we want them to understand that the journey is just as important as the destination. And that's something we've tried to emphasize in our own personal lives, but also wanted to instill in them. And then Ellie tells me it's working. So that she's doing it.
I love that. So Ellie's name means shine bright or shining light. Which one was it?
Shining light. And then her middle name is Marie. So it means shining light of my beloved.
Wow. Yeah. And I kind of flip them immediately of like, man, I am the beloved, and then I get to shine. And oh my goodness, love her name. How do we raise kids who shine, who are bright, adding brightness around them? Give me some just top of mind thinking around that concept.
Man, well, I mean, the way I would say that's a big deal to us. I mean, I would say almost like, I know a lot of people maybe don't think of it this way, but I think success, I was actually thinking a lot about this on the Colorado trip. Success for us, when I look at my kids and I know that we are doing it well, that we are succeeding as parents, is when I see the fruit of the Spirit easily pouring out of their daily life, right? And so to me, what's neat is when you tie that in to the brain science, and in the brain science, that when we, all of us as human beings, when we are at our best, and we are really like able to show up, be seen, bring more light to a dark place, right? It's when we're in the prefrontal cortex. Yeah. And what's interesting, Jeff, about the prefrontal cortex is I can only get there when I feel safe and loved. And so what I noticed, like, there's a few times on this trip where maybe my kids, they were acting in a way that wasn't congruent with who I know they are. Like I could tell they looked a little insecure in a moment, right? And what I knew, because of what my wife and I do as parent coaches, is I knew, oh, in that moment, somehow they don't feel safe and loved in this moment. For some reason, they feel like they can't fully show up as themselves. They got to, like, my daughter Abby, when she gets nervous or anxious, she gets really talkative. And so she's talk. So I'm watching her just like talk nonstop. And later on, I follow up with her. And I'm just like, hey, Abby, what was going on in that situation? It seemed like you were just talking a lot. She's, I know, Dad. I knew I was doing it when I was doing it. She's like, but in that moment, I just felt really nervous when I was around those people. And the silence was awkward. And I was like, I wanted to fill the space. And I was like, honey, you don't need to. Like you being quiet is just as beautiful as you talking. Yeah. So you don't have to do, I know your strength is typically the talking, but if you pause, you allow that other person to shine just like you're shining, you know, and you don't need to fill that space. So I say, in short, I've kind of been thinking about this idea, Jeff, of just every moment I'm looking for, what is the fruit of the spirit that we're trying to cultivate more in the kids? Is it love? Is it joy? Is it peace? Is it kindness? Is it meekness? You know, what are those? And as I see them growing in them, that's when I really believe they're shining.
Yes, I've heard you in some of my research for this conversation talk about you want every area, every room, every team, every class, every home, every vehicle that your kids are in to be better because they were there. Did I get that right as far as a goal?
Totally. No,
Would
totally.
you expound on that?
Tell that. Yeah, I tell that, Jeff, a lot to parents when I teach parents that they're like, the model, we have high expectations, but we offer high support. So really a lot of the conflicts that are happening with our kids is we've got expectations that are high. And I think that's good. I want us to believe our kids can do great things, right? So we have these, but lots of times we're not offering the support that's needed for them to succeed. So then over time, we actually start lowering our expectations because we're like, dang, my kid can't seem to do that. So I try to tell parents when I'm working, I have super high expectations on my kids. I really believe that every place they are is going to be better because they are there. Yeah. And if for some reason that isn't happening, and I'm noticing that, then me and my wife are wondering, what is the support my kid needed in that moment to be able to really shine the way God intended them to in that moment. And you know where that starts, Jeff? It starts with some real intentional, you know, my wife and I have been real intentional about this, even on silly things. Like, let's say I'm going to go to the grocery store and there's a podcast. Maybe I want to listen to Dad Awesome. I'm thinking like, sure. I'm going to listen to Dad Awesome on my trip to the grocery store. So I'm kind of looking forward to it. I want to hear what Jeff's got to say today. And then what I will do every time, I will say to my family, hey, I'm going to the store. Does anybody want to go with me? And 9 times out of 10, somebody does. Yeah, so cool, they'll say, cool. I want to go. And part of me for a minute goes, dang.
No solo time. Yeah.
I kind of wanted to listen to that podcast. Yeah. But I want to offer that invitation because I want them to know that I believe everywhere I go, it's better if they are with me. And so when I go to the grocery store, the whole time I'm shifting my focus, not from, oh, I didn't get to listen to that podcast, to what is this moment about? How do I get to enjoy my kid now? Right. And then when we get home, I'm very intentional about getting in the garage. And this is something I've had to practice. It's not something I initially did. And I look back in the back seat and I'll say, hey, thanks for going. It was so much better with you, with me than without me, you know? And I want them to hear that. And I want them to have it firmly grounded because I believe it's what God is constantly saying to them, that every moment is better when they show up.
Wow, Kyle. So you actually are not curiously looking for, maybe you're doing this at the same time in parallel, but you're actually choosing to say and affirm that it's better with them, regardless of how it actually was. Did I get that right?
100%. Yeah, because think about it. That's like, to me, that's what God is always whispering to us. He's not looking around trying to go, he legitimately believes no matter how I'm acting or whatever, that it is better. And can I tell you where I kind of got this, Jeff? It was kind of funny. This was great insight. And I'm sharing this for your podcast listeners because this goes down to why it's so important to have men in your life who will speak truth to you, right? Who will really be honest with you. And I remember when my wife and I first got married and we would go to these like groups at church. And I'm a very talkative person. My wife is not, right? So we would go to these groups, and I used to think it was cute, like when we were dating, how little she would talk at the groups. And I'd be like, oh, look, they asked if she had anything to offer, and she didn't have anything to offer. But as we got married, and I'm trying to like create a community, I would be like, I'd leave those groups, Jeff, and I'd be like, did you not have anything to say? Like, why don't you say something? And she'd be like, I just couldn't think of anything. I'm like, how could you not think of anything? Like, we're right in this group. So I began to like be very critical of my wife and see her as less than me. And so one day I'm talking to my friend about this, and I'm just kind of complaining, I'm like, Sarah's, and I'm telling him, and he says to me, he says, hey, well, Kyle, can I ask you a question? Do you believe that group is better off for Sarah being there? And I said, yes. Do you believe it's only if she says something? I said, well, I mean, no, but the point of going is to share and to and he said, okay, Kyle, so you believe the group is better off just for her being there, whether she shares something or not? Yes. So you believe her presence has enough value and worth. She doesn't need to somehow create that with her words, right? Yeah. Do you believe you could show up and not say anything? And I was like, Jeff, I don't know if I believe that. Yeah. And he said, I think you're making your issue her issue.
Oh, wow.
That maybe your wife is showing you that you actually don't have to go and talk to make that moment valuable. That maybe you just showing up is enough, and that God is fine whether you say something or you don't. Just be there. And your presence changed. So I that really touched me, and it really shifted things in our marriage. But then it became kind of just like we just would not let ourselves say things like, oh, I just need time away from the kids. Oh, I just wish, because our time is so limited. And I believe every moment's better with them than without them.
So this is so helpful, Kyle. So I'm thinking about real practically. You're saying high expectations that these spaces will be better because my kids are there. High support, and one of the examples you just gave is actually speaking life, speaking value, speaking it is better because you're there first. So that's one. That's practical to get there. Any other just high support examples of this is how to help guide our kids to make that place actually better because
I mean 100%. So even like what I was saying about Abby, this came up while we're in Colorado and we're at a friend's house, and I noticed two specific things. I noticed how my older daughter was talking a lot to fill the space, right? So we're at this guy's house who they barely know, right? And I'm noticing just a lack of curiosity. My daughter, as 14-year-olds can be, she's more self-focused, not really thinking about asking curious questions, right? And then my son, who's a real deep thinker, this guy starts talking about the work he does, and it's really interesting work that he does with energy and like with electric cars, and it's like very cool. And so I'm just like thinking in my head, Jeff, like, oh my God, Brennan would love this. So I look at Brennan at one point and I throw him like a softball. And I say, hey, Brennan, do you have any questions for him? And Brennan's like, no. And then I'm like, what? So what that looks like is I just keep that in there. And then I start to model to them what I'm wanting them to do. So I look at the guy and I say, hey, can you tell my kids exactly what it is you do and what you love about it? And so he starts to begin to tell about this. And then I just started using those skills. I started being curious. I started asking, and you could see the guy get excited. Like he was so pumped to talk about this. And so when we left, I just said, hey guys, could I give you some feedback about what happened in there? I'm just kind of curious. So that's when Abby said, I know, I was just so anxious. So then that's when we got to say, well, honey, how could we help you? And she said, hey, Mom, if I'm doing that, could you say this? And I said, hey,
signal. Yep.
Yeah. And I said, hey, honey, did you notice how I asked those questions and how oh no, I did notice that. That's what I'm saying. So maybe next time we have a situation like that, I'll remind you to be more curious than actually. And then I said to my son, Brennan, what was going on with you? And he's like, I was just so lost in my head about all the things he was saying. And I'm like, and I hear that, son. I just want you to know that you may not get another time with that guy, right? Like you had an opportunity there, and I just don't want you to miss it. Okay. So how could I help you next time be able to take this like real deep thinking you have and really reach out to this person? Because that could create a really great opportunity for you in the future.
Yeah, Kyle, this is coming back full circle. You mentioned a little bit about brain science, just briefly at the beginning of the conversation and the prefrontal cortex, but also I believe the way you've learned it kind of broken down is there's like brainstem, like very fight,
Hmm.
flight, freeze. And then
Yeah.
there's another step, and then there's the prefrontal cortex. And I'm thinking about the curiosity moments that maybe your
Yeah.
son in that moment with an
Yeah.
adult with job
Yep.
talk, right? Maybe
Yep.
just didn't quite feel safe or
Exactly.
confident, right? So then he's
Yeah.
not going to be curious. Did I get that? Is that kind of why?
100%. No, you're right. I love it. So yeah, Jeff, and pointing out he couldn't be that in that
Mhm.
moment, right? So it wasn't that he somehow chose not to be,
Yeah.
just where he was at in the brain, he was overwhelmed with all the information. So
Yeah.
that's where, and I love tying this in when I'm talking to believers, Jeff. This is what God does with us, right? So, like in this moment, I'm kind of like God's presence to my son, to where I can help him because I'm in my prefrontal cortex. I'm not feeling insecure in that moment. So instead of looking at my
Wow.
son going, "What is your problem, Brandon?" Like, come on, son. And that thought did cross my mind for a
Shame,
moment.
right? That'd be
Yes.
shame. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Like, how have I not trained him correctly to be confident in these
Yeah.
moments? Right. And I could feel that happen, but then I had to pull that back
Yeah.
and understand he doesn't mean to do this. Like in this moment, he just doesn't know how to do. If he did, he would. If he knew how to do the thing I'm asking, I believe so. So like in that high expectations model,
Yeah.
I tell parents I only let myself think two things. So if my kid is not reaching those expectations, the two things I let myself think is either they don't know how or they don't believe they can. So
Sure.
either it's a lack of teaching or it's a lack of confidence. Now, some parents will say, well, sometimes they're doing it on purpose. And I say, oh, that can be true, right? No doubt. But if I let myself go to that space, then I'm actually putting myself against my kid.
Yeah. We don't want that.
Now, yeah, now I am opposing them, and the only answer to that is I have to change my kid. So there's been moments where maybe I walk upstairs and maybe my daughter is mad at me, and I've asked her to clean her room, and I go and the room is not clean. If I go upstairs and I believe she didn't clean it because she's trying to like stick it to me, then the only reaction I'm going to have is a negative one,
Yeah.
right? Whereas instead, if let's say she actually did it to say I'm mad at you, well, I don't need to play that game.
Yeah.
I
Why?
I yeah, I am for her. I'm not against her.
Yes.
And so if
Yes.
she's mad at me, she can tell me. She doesn't need to like not clean her room to show me that. She can just say, "Dad, I'm upset with you right now." And then I could say, "Okay, let's talk
Yeah.
about what you're upset about," right? And then that's where we really grow intimacy in our relationship with our kids. Whereas if I just think we're against each other, all I'm going to do is cause isolation. We're going to push away from each other.
And that's kind of what you did with your wife when she wasn't sharing at that small group. You almost
Yes.
slipped down into a little bit of you went against her a little bit, I
What
think. Yeah, yeah.
No,
And
yeah. And when you're doing the brain stuff, like when you're in the limbic system, the emotional center of the brain, like I was with my wife, is you can only see the world through your perspective. So in
hmm,
that moment, I'm going to see my wife as not good enough. And actually in your marriage, it will discourage you being married to that person. So it hurts your marriage to think less of that person. Whereas instead, I can just see my wife. My wife's just being my wife. Like this used to be cute at one point, and
yeah.
the only thing that changed was my perspective of it.
So are the three, let me make sure I have these three with the brain science.
Yeah,
It's the brainstem, the limbic system, and the prefrontal cortex. Did I get that right? Those are the three.
yeah,
Can you
yeah.
explain the three?
Yeah, yes. So basically, when we're first born, this is all from Dr. Dan Siegel. He's a
Okay.
neuroscientist who's written a lot of great parenting books, but he's got an approach called interpersonal neurobiology, Jeff. And it's basically the science of how my brain interacts with your brain. And the reason why I want to share this because it really connects well to how God has wired us. So I want for those people who are listeners who are, faith is a big deal. This is really, really cool. When you're 0 to 18 months, when you have a little baby, the main form part of the kid's brain is the brainstem. So this is all fight, flight, or freeze. So everyone who's had a baby, 0 to 18 months, all the kid's doing is either smiling or crying. The kid's either or sleeping, right? So the kid is either like happy and content or they're like freaking out. So what every parent does that they pick up that kid and they just naturally hold that kid and kind of rock that kid. And what you do is pretty awesome. You actually help that kid regulate their body with your body that the kid can't do it without your help. And so if you don't feel safe, if you are scared or your heart is beating fast or you're breathing quick, I don't know if you've experienced this, Jeff, but your kid won't eat, your kid won't sleep, your kid will be in this panic mode, you know?
And so many rookie dads and their first child, especially, feel like it's the mom's zone, right? That
Yes.
first 0 to 18 months. And the idea of take your shirt off and go skin to
Yes.
skin and just enjoy your kid. Like it's
Mm,
like I try to tell all these dads,
yeah.
just enjoy
Yeah.
them. And you don't have to know exactly what you're doing, but just
Yes.
chill out, right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
more complicated for some. There's different complications with bottles
Sure,
and all
sure.
this stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
But
yeah.
I used to struggle. Even our third
Yes.
child, getting like myself calm and not
Mm,
overwhelmed. It
yeah.
was I struggled.
Well, Jeff, I'll confess, I sucked at it so bad that one time my wife left me home, went back to work with our first kid, Abby,
Okay.
and she said, "Hey, I'm going to work." And I'm like, "Okay, what do I do with Abby?" She's like, "You just take this bottle and you feed her. It's really simple." And I'm like, it doesn't sound as simple as you're saying." So she leaves. And seriously, I was in the brainstem, like I was in fight, flight, or freeze, and I was holding Abby. And see, what I want your listeners to hear: if I'm in that mode, if I'm in fight, flight, or freeze, she can't not be there. The fear I am feeling will feed into her body, right? So she would not take the bottle, and I'm all tense, and I'm
Yeah.
having visions of my wife divorcing me because my daughter died of starvation,
I've
and so
been here. I've been there. Yes, yes.
so then I don't know if you did this. I actually took Abby to the babysitter, and the babysitter fed Abby, and I just sat there in shame and like, what a sucky dad I am.
So I never to a babysitter, but I had to drive the baby across town, get my wife
Yeah,
out of to come out to the
yes.
car and nurse our baby because I could not
Oh,
get the bottle. So I did. Yeah. So there we go.
okay, good,
Dad
good.
fails.
So so
I'll let you
then
keep going. Yeah.
yeah, so then 18 months to 4 years old is when the limbic system comes online. So
Yeah.
now you'll notice your kid has a lot of emotions, right?
Yeah.
It's not just, am I going to die or am I going to live? Now they can be nervous and anxious and
Mhm.
disappointed and jealous, all,
Mhm.
all these kind of big emotions. And if you can imagine being a little kid, I mean, if you've ever felt jealous, Jeff, I know I have. Like, if you can imagine that feeling coming on them and having no
Mhm.
idea what it is, what to do with it, it's freaking them out. And it's not that they're completely losing control of their body, but they feel like you as the adult don't get it. And what that looks like is a tantrum. It looks like, they asked for a cookie, you said they couldn't have another one, and they think, you don't understand. I may never get another cookie ever. And so like, so
Yep.
they'll throw the tantrum. So
Yeah.
what Siegel says in his work is to help them move from the brainstem to the limbic system, they need to know, am I safe? But to
Mhm.
move out of the limbic system, they need to know, am I loved? So what
Wow.
they need is connection. And for every listener, every dad, you know this feeling. It's when you come home from work and you've had a stressed out day. And when you talk to your wife about your day, you're wanting her to just listen. You're wanting her to just care. You're not wanting her to tell you that's ridiculous that you're upset about that or try to just solve all your problems. Nobody in the limbic system wants that. We want to go to a friend or a person who will just empathize with what your day was like, you know? And that's exactly what the 3-year-old or the 4-year-old is wanting. They just want you to empathize.
Wow.
Okay. And then once they move from there, 4 years old on up to about mid 20s
Yeah.
is when your prefrontal cortex is being developed. And that's where self-control is. That's where empathy is, problem solving. So here's the beauty of knowing this information, why this awareness is so helpful,
Yeah.
is the reason why, like in marriage counseling, let's say the husband keeps trying to solve the wife's problems and the wife is saying, I just want him to shut up and listen to me. The reason why that works is because in order to really empathize with my wife, I have to be in the prefrontal cortex. So let's say she's in the limbic system. I can help shift my wife up to a better part of her brain just by answering the question, which is, am I
Am I
loved?
loved?
Yeah. Do you understand what I'm going through? Will you connect with me? Or are you going to judge me and shame me like I'm already doing to myself? Right. So if you can connect this now, there's a great psychiatrist. He's a Christian psychiatrist named Dr. Kurt Thompson,
Yeah.
and he's got a book called Anatomy of the Soul. And in his book, he studied with Dr. Siegel, and he talks about how this shows us how God has wired us and why the Christian disciplines are so effective is because when we pray, when we meditate, when we worship, when we do these exercises that have been known throughout church history to be healthy and effective for us, we're answering these questions. We're connecting to somebody outside of us who's whispering to us, you are safe. You are loved. And then once you get to the prefrontal cortex, the question is, what can I learn? You know, like
Mm.
basically, how can we do this together? How can we change this situation? And I just picture God coming with an open hand and us coming with a closed hand, and he stays calm with us. He comforts us until our hand opens up, and then our hands can come together and we can really solve that problem together.
Wow. Kyle, I'm thinking about Adam and Eve's choice in the garden, and
Yeah.
that they were just trying to answer that, am I loved, in the wrong
Yeah.
place. And then they hid,
Yes.
like, it's just like this versus the go walk with God, that option. Let's work it out there. There's
Yeah.
lots of layering. So
Well,
I'm going
well,
to
well,
definitely,
well, even think about Jeff in that story. The main reason why there was such a temptation was because the temptation, the first lie was he's withholding from you.
yeah, yeah.
He won't give you the thing that you actually want. So you have to go take it. And that's actually the very thing you're dealing with kids when they're very little. And so that's where I want to help them know I'm not withholding anything.
Mm,
Everything I have is yours. Everything I have, right? But I'm going to
yes.
help you get self-control. I'm going to help you maintain, control of your body. So then we can together work together towards a healthier outcome than just demanding and grabbing and taking.
Yes. This I'm sure this all threads together with the idea of, throughout even the last 100 years, the approach to control-based parenting and
Mm-hmm,
really behavior-based parenting,
mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
versus kind of the empowering,
Yeah.
the connecting with their emotions, and really the
Yes.
inside out, I think, is even the way it's
Yep.
described by
Yep.
one
Yep.
author.
Yep.
Would you explain kind of the difference, the options that we all have? We can go
Totally,
this
totally.
way
No,
or that way.
no, I love that you're asking that, Jeff, because that was really helpful to me too. Is you basically have two streams. So you have two streams of parenting. You have one that's behavior focused and one that's emotion focused. One that's an outside in model and one that's an inside out model. And of course, I love the inside out model
Mhm.
because I think it's what God does. Every time I've gone to God in prayer, I feel like he was always doing an inside out thing. It wasn't outside in.
Right.
But the issue with it's not that the behavior focus is bad. It's not that it's wrong. It's just limited.
Mhm.
It's limited. Now, we do know throughout history, behaviorism, which is, kind of been coined by the psychologist B.F. Skinner, it's very helpful in a sense of if you are a person who's sad a lot and you just practice smiling more, like that will help you. If you're depressed and you're laying in bed a lot, getting up and moving around and taking a shower, that can help change your mood, right? All of that we know to be true. So it's not even saying there's no truth to that. It's just when you're raising a little human being, I think the most powerful, sustainable way to help them and disciple them is helping them know what's happening inside and then letting that inside change the outside. And so if I can give you a quick example of how I first confronted this, where, okay, we're at church one day and we had two kids, Abby and Brennan, and the pastor was preaching on the fruit of the spirit being peace.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at my family going, dude, we got this, bro. Like we got peace. Just like, I'm so proud of myself. I'm like, oh, we have done this. And we come home and Brennan was a little baby. Abby was probably 4 at the time, maybe 3. And I remember my wife starts breastfeeding Brennan after church and Abby flips out. Like Abby, just like she wants mom. And she is like, get
Now. Yeah.
get Brennan off of mom. So she's like literally climbing my wife, trying to grab her. And I'm like, what is happening?
Mhm.
Where is the peace? Right. So I grab her, just knowing no one else. So I grab her, I pick her
Sure.
up, I go back to the back bathroom and I sit against the door in the bathroom. And she starts like hitting the door and she's like, let me out. Let me out. She's like, and I said, Abby, we're not going anywhere until you calm down. Like, we're not. And she just keeps screaming. So eventually I put my head down, Jeff, and I just start praying. I just start
Yeah.
saying, God, like, help
Mm.
me, Lord. And Abby then looks at me a little calmer and says, what are you doing? And I said, I'm praying, honey, because I have no idea what else to do. And so I saw her body start to relax. I saw, and from the brain stuff, I saw her move from the brainstem to the limbic system. How do I know that? Because she's no longer in fight or flight. So she looks at me and I look at her and I say, Abby, why are you so mad? And she, with tears in her eyes, said, I don't know, Dad. I don't know. And I said, like, I was listening to the Holy Spirit, felt like the Holy Spirit said, it's called jealousy. She's never felt it.
Yeah.
So I said, Abby, can I give you a hug? And she gave me a hug. And then we went back and we repaired it. She went back to mom, apologized for all that stuff, right? And then when I was talking to a friend about this story, he illuminated even more. He said, Kyle, how many times has God done that with you? How many times has he sat against the bathroom door as you were screaming and yelling, saying, I want what that person has. Give me the promotion. Give me the job. Give me the wealth. And he's like, no, we're not leaving this room until you're calmed down, because I don't want you to leave this room, Kyle, and hurt the people you love. Mm-hmm. Once you connect with me, I'll help you be able to ask and pursue what you want in a way that isn't motivated by fear and jealousy and lack.
Wow, yeah. Kyle, the celebration of repair moments. You briefly mentioned we went back and repaired, and I just know this is true about you. Like, you truly see a stumble moment, I was way too strong there. I used my size, my voice, whatever the thing happened. Like, you actually like treasure repair moments. And I haven't met that many people that talk about them with as much like joy of, I'm not glad that there was hurt caused, but what an opportunity to demonstrate love and forgiveness and repentance. Could you, explain a little bit your perspective on repair?
But Jeff, I'll tell you what motivated that. I was really mad at myself for messing up so much, losing my emotions so many times, and like yelling I was just so mad at myself. And I thought to myself, wait a sec, wait. It's unrealistic to say I'm never going to do this. Like, I'm obviously going to mess up. So Kyle, you know what you need to get really good at is repair, right? And so at first, what that looked like was your standard, I'm coming back and I'm apologizing like freaking daily to the kids. And I remember one day my daughter Abby was like, Dad, I love that you apologize. Could you just change it? Instead of like, yeah, she's like, it seems like we're constantly saying, okay, Dad, we forgive you. Like, change it. So then I started to pursue what really would change it. And I felt like, oh, the thing I was missing was vulnerability. Mm-hmm. I wasn't being vulnerable. I was really wanting them to make me feel better. I was really asking for forgiveness so they would absolve me of the guilt or shame I was feeling, right? And I thought, that's why this isn't helping, because I'm still being motivated by shame. I'm still being motivated by fear. So that's when I started helping my clients, and I started doing it myself by going, what's underneath all this anger and this mad that I'm feeling? And really what we know is it's fear. Really, fear and hurt are what's under anger most of the time. And so I started in these repair moments, Jeff, I would come back to my kids. And this was, once again, an attempt to limit the damage and the baggage I was like giving my kids. And so I'm like, okay, if I'm going to mess up throughout my life multiple times, I want to make sure and limit the damage that's caused, right? So I want to make these moments about intimacy, about us growing together. So how could we do it? So I would do this. I would encourage every dad who has any issues with yelling to do this, because this was super helpful. And is I would say to my kid, I would say, hey, earlier today I yelled at you. And they say, I know, Dad, you got really mad. I know, I own it. Okay. Do you think my anger was about you or about me? And initially they would always say about them. And I would say, honey, my anger is never about you. My anger is always telling you about me. Okay. And then they would stop, kind of like surprised. And then I would say, can I tell you what it says about me? And now they're curious. They'd be like, what? And then I would say to them, I was afraid. And then they would say, afraid of what? And I'd say, I was afraid I was losing control of the situation. Yeah. I was afraid my voice no longer had any power in your life. So I was going to get really loud and make sure it did. Or I was afraid of looking stupid in that moment. So I tried to make you look stupid. And I'm really sorry about that. Will you forgive me for that? And those moments, really, I could see it start changing our relationship to where, one, my kids were now interested in the follow-up conversations, which I think are vital, instead of being so like, Dad's going to lecture, Dad's going to follow up and tell. Like, instead, they saw these follow-up moments as moments that we were going to turn that moment that looks so negative into something so beautiful, right? But then what it does, Jeff, is now that my kids are teenagers, or my daughter is, my son's almost there, is now they're doing the same thing with me. They're able to tell me what they were afraid of and why they yelled.
You've normalized vulnerability in those
Yeah.
moments and a desire to grow and change and bring healing. And oh, Kyle, like that's so powerful.
Yeah.
I haven't even mentioned yet the name of your podcast, which I wanted to just say congratulations. The Art of Raising Humans,
That's right.
100 and like 203 episodes at the
Yes. Yeah.
top.
Yeah. I think we dropped 102. Yeah. This past Monday. Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank
That
you.
is so fun for me, for Dad Awesome to cheer on other
Yeah.
parenting resources that have crested the century mark, the 100
Thank you.
episodes. That's a huge deal of just
Yeah.
resources. But you,
Yeah.
every episode, you're dropping like 4 to 10 books, like you should, this you're talking to authors, you're sharing from,
Yeah.
maybe I'd say your perspective is you're going deeper than
Yeah.
typically what Dad Awesome goes, as far as the science, the brain,
Yeah.
in such an amazing way. Like, so I just wanted to cheer for what you guys are doing, send our people your way, but say
Yeah.
congratulations. But also, could we do a quick book blitz where,
Sure.
for dads, for the Dad
Yeah.
Awesome community, 3, 4, 5, whatever. What are some
Yeah.
of your top, like, these will be helpful for us?
Yeah. Well, and so Jeff, when we were talking about this before the recording, is something that I really try to intentionally do with dads, because I know so many dads, one, they aren't as motivated to read, which I would encourage every dad. That's what successful people do. Say read books.
Leaders are readers, and
Yes,
dads, you're a leader, so be a reader,
yes,
right? Yeah,
exactly. Well, and really, there's so much out there that God wants to help you with, and there's great
yeah,
authors who've given you that. So you don't have to like fumble through it. You can just go read some stuff. So I know it might be hard, but you got audio, you got all types of ways, right? And
yep,
then I also know in the parenting world, a lot of times what I run into is it's the moms who are seeking out information, and they're finding a lot of great voices, but they're mostly other women. So a lot of dads are like, and I was too. Initially, I was like, how am I supposed to be like this woman? Like, I don't understand.
yeah,
Like she's so nurturing, and that's just not me, right? And I actually, funny enough, I tried to do, like, my wife is like those people. When she talks to the kids, it sounds just like those people. So I try to do it. I'd be like, this feels weird. Like, this is not me. I
yep,
need to figure out a way. So that's how I found these other authors.
good,
So
good,
I love Dr. Cohen, and he's got a book called Playful Parenting. And
amazing.
so I love how he takes conflict and he gives dad the freedom to turn every conflict into a moment of play and then a
Sweet.
moment of learning, right? He's also got a really good book for kids who are anxious, and that book's called Opposite of Worry. And so that's another Dr. Cohen book. Now, for those dads who love the science and you're like, oh, I'd love the science, then you want to delve into Dr. Dan Siegel's book. So he's got in a book called No Drama Discipline. He's also got a book called Parenting from the Inside Out, and one other book called The Whole Brain Child. So he's
Nice.
a neuroscientist who, like, now dads who love research, like, hey, wait a second, does this emotion focused parenting actually work? Well, there's actually been some research on that, and it does. And so if you go to Dr. Gottman, he's got in a book called Raising Emotionally Intelligent Children, and he is a data guy, and he actually takes two control groups where one is more behavior focused, the other one's more emotion focused, and the outcomes of how those kids grow up. Obviously the emotion focus more come out self-controlled, more able to be assertive in their communication, all this kind of thing. So those are great. And then of course I mentioned Dr. Kurt Thompson with
Yep.
Anatomy of the Soul, and one more I'll say is Dr. Gary Thomas with Sacred Parenting. And so
Okay,
that's
we have 70 resources on the Dad Awesome resource
yeah.
bank, kind of the resource vault. And I think only one of the like 9 books
Okay.
you mentioned is on there. So this is like a treasure. We just
Yeah.
thank you for
You're welcome.
passing along that strong
Yeah.
recommendation and contextualized for us dads. Kyle, is there anything else that we haven't covered yet? I'm sure there are a ton, but anything just top of mind, kind of, you're feeling like on your heart, you
Yeah.
want to share with the Dad Awesome listener?
Yeah, I think I'd wrap it up. The reason why I love talking to dads in particular, Jeff, is I know you have this heart, and so do I, that I think right now in culture, it's very difficult to be a dad. Okay. And the reason why it's very difficult is because the old school way of just doing stuff like it was done before, just control, power, intimidation, we know better now. We just know better. But the problem is no one's showing dads how to do it.
Wow.
Lots of dads who want to change. They're like, I don't know anybody else not doing this. And yet we're all secretly going, it's hurting our relationship with our kids. Like, our teenagers aren't talking to us. They're not opening up to us. And so there's like this shame that they're not doing it better, but then having no tools to do it differently, or no role models to even look to go, oh, that guy did it and his kids turned out great. So I know as a dad, my wife and I were so worried that we were screwing up our kids.
Yeah.
And it's really, I speak to you from confidence, not that we do it all perfect. That's gross. We don't do it that way. We mess up a lot. And I loved how you gave me the opportunity. Like, I repair a bunch, so like a lot of what I teach parents is how to repair, how to follow up. So I want to just speak to those dads who are saying, man, I want to stop yelling. Man, I want to have a long, sustainable relationship with my kids that goes way into adulthood, where we are open and vulnerable and close. But I just don't know how to do it. That there are resources for you. Okay.
Yeah.
And so I get to help dads all throughout the world, Jeff, get to coach them with this. And so if they don't, they can come to me, they can come to a lot of places. They've got your podcast, they got my podcast. There's a lot of places, but I just want them to have hope and know that there are people who can help them be the dad that they want to be.
Thank you. And we will link out, I mean, your website, your podcast, you offer that coaching counseling side, which is amazing. And you can be anywhere and do it digitally. So that's so great.
And I would tell them, if they're interested in knowing more, just email me at
Perfect.
Kyle@artofraisinghumans.com. So if they email
Perfect.
me at Kyle@artofraisinghumans.
Shortcut. They don't have to go looking for it. We got it.
Yeah.
And we'll have it in the show notes.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kyle. Would you say a short prayer over all of us dads?
Yes, love to. God, thank you so much that you are such a great dad, that you have been such a wonderful model to me about how to love my kids more deeply than I ever thought was possible. And thank you, Lord, for giving Jeff and I the opportunity to reach out to so many dads with your heart. And so I pray that every dad here was able to feel that hope and able to say, man, maybe I could be that dad. Maybe I could be a model to my kids that actually makes it enticing to someday follow God and see him as a loving father who's always there for them. So I just pray that you put that in their hearts and help them to be able to find that and reach out to that, have the courage to start making the change that they know they want to make. And just thank you, Lord, for this information and knowledge in this time. In Jesus' name, amen.